Now this is the speed control unit off of a A901 Kenwood Chef, and you can probably just see in shot there that at least one of the capacitors has failed quite spectacularly. And what I'm just going to show you is what I do to repair the speed control unit on one of these mixers. So I should do it in stages, starting with that capacitor just up the top there. I think that's a 0.15 microfarad. I bought a kit from eBay including the feet, and I think it was about £11–15, something like that, so well worth it to get this Kenwood Chef back on the road. Right, now what I'm going to do is attempt to film the repair in real time, so any swearing I'll have to edit out later, so here goes. So you can see that one is, well, had it I think. What I tend to do is put in the components as I go. That way I can keep track of what I've replaced and what I haven't. So, what I tend to generally do is use a bit of mechanical fix. That means just wrap the legs around the tag if there's a decent one there present before soldering the joint. Now, the solder I'm using contains a flux already in with it, so it's a decent quality solder. So I'm not pre-preparing the surface, I'm just going to warm the component. Just let the solder run, not getting it too hot. And the same on this leg, just warm it slightly first. Don't want too much solder. You see loads of soldering where there's just soldering everywhere. That should do it. I'll just tidy that little leg up there. That's it in place. Okay, what should we go for next? I usually start with this little resistor here. You'll notice I'm not desoldering anything here, just warming components up and then taking the old one off. This should just be enough, we don't need to desolder anything here. Some of you may disagree, but that's the way I do it. And what I'm going to do next is just replace that straight away. You'll notice that some of these capacitors are they look different to the ones that I've taken out. The reason for that is they're slightly later components with I guess better quality materials. Now what I'm doing here is actually using the other side of this tag. I don't know why Kenwood didn't do that, but it makes soldering or resoldering a new component a bit more straightforward. I guess they had other ideas in the factory that they might be used for something else, but for this machine we're going to make use of it. So hopefully just solder that resistor in place. There we go. Bit smoky, but looking better already. Right, I think we're going to go for this one next. Always a little bit tricky because there are two components, a resistor and that capacitor, soldered to that tag there. So, I'm going to warm that tag up slightly. I say slightly, I mean quite a lot. This is one of those soldering jobs where you actually need two pairs of hands. Anyone who does a bit of soldering will know what I mean by that. But yeah, we've just broken the seal there. In an ideal world I wouldn't be soldering like this. It would be nice and clean and on a workbench, but we live in the real world and sometimes we just have to wrestle components out of their place. So I'll tell you what we'll do. So we'll just warm that component up there and warm this resistor up. Just realised I have my hand in the way of the lens there. What we don't want to do is burn the insulation on some of these cables. Some people would remove all of that, but again, I'm being careful. The reason this comes as a kit is that once one component goes, it can load up some of the others. So even though some of these resistors, I haven't actually bothered testing these because I'm going to replace them anyway, but actually what you can find is components sometimes test okay, but then fail later. So it's best to be on the safe side. Some of these components can run quite warm and therefore denature over time. So you only want to do the job once. So for the sake of a few quid, it's always worth, or a few dollars depending on where you're watching this, always worth changing out the whole job lot. It's a bit like doing an oil change on a car, not bothering to change the filter, you wouldn't do it. So it's just, as you can see, I'm trying not to damage anything else on there. Now what I'm doing here is actually getting that tag ready on the far corner there to solder two tags at once. I will make that neater in a second, but they just sit one above each other there, and what I'll do is I'll just clamp those off. Again, just give them a mechanical fix. I'll clean those tags up later, or rather the ends I should just cut those. A little bit of heat. I know I'm going to get comments on my YouTube feed saying that I should have cleaned all the tag up, should have desoldered it first, but I assure you I've done many of these before and they all work, so this one won't be any different. I hope. It's always the first time. Just let that cool down. I was always told that it's actually better to wait for the component to cool naturally rather than blowing it, but we'll just help that one along a little bit. That's ready, I think. So what we've got to do now is solder those two tags where we've got this component here called a triac. But what I'm going to do now is actually just, I know where they go, so that's not a problem, is take this triac off. Again, you might ask, why is he replacing that? There's a little nut underneath here, and my finger is just underneath just to catch it when it inevitably falls off. And there it is. You can see just what I've got there. Just Put that over there, safekeeping, and that's now ready to be lifted off. We'll do the same as before. We'll just warm up each leg and take it off with the pair of pliers there. Let's get a nice, there we go, just a nice bond there. Heat's transferring nicely, and that leg's now come off. Let's move him out of the way. It's the first time I've actually done a real-time narrated video. I'm guessing there are more interesting things to watch. But let me know what you think. So on with the repair. I think what I'll do here is just measure up the triac. This is the new one. Again, there are tests available on YouTube if you fancy testing one of these. This is the old triac, this is the new one. And I guess it's like an electric switch, I guess. Now you've got 3 terminals there. Now they've all got to be bent to suit the board layout, so that's not how they come, but it's fairly easy to bend these legs. I just recommend, if you do so, use a pair of pliers. Don't be tempted to use your finger. So I've done this a few times before, so I just tend to do that. Nice and neat, and that way we've got our layout about right, ready to go onto the board. It's worth mentioning as well, actually, this is actually a heatsink for the back of the triac, so what I tend to do is just put a little bit of paste on there. This is like a thermal compound ready to transfer all the heat across. And the purpose of that compound is really just to ensure maximum heat transfer between the component and component, easy for me to say, and the heatsink there. Some of you might have noticed a bit of continuity there because tea has arrived. It's very important, tea. I find my repairs go much better with it. I've cursed it now saying that. Anyway, what I'm going to do is put the screw back in and try not to lose the nut underneath. This is where I'm probably fighting gravity, and what I might do is just hold that with a pair of pliers and then put the screw in from above. He says and drops the washer on the floor. You don't want to do that. I'm only doing this way because I can't be bothered to get my magnet, which is upstairs, and I'm now in the shed, so with a little bit of practice I can hold the nut from the other side and just do that up. Enough. Right, so back at a stage where we can start to do some soldering. So that nut is now nice and tight, components in situ, we're ready to solder 3 components. This, the other end of this capacitor, this resistor to that terminal, and the repair is done, he says. So what we'll do is I think let's solder this component first, I think. So let's just tie him on round there. I guess the reason I made this video, well, I am making this video, I haven't actually finished it yet, is it's really, I think there's a lot of information on YouTube. I don't know if anyone's actually covered the thing that goes wrong the most. I've already done a video showing the components that fail, like the one we saw right at the beginning of this video, but I thought it'd just be interesting, or not as the case may be, to actually film the repair in real time. I'm making a right hash of that. Sometimes that's just the way it goes. So let's move that component over there. I try and keep these solder jobs sort of fairly neat. I'll just move him out of the way slightly, so there's a kind of layering to components in the right way. It's not essential, but just means things looks a little bit neater when somebody else opens it back up, if they open it back up again. As I say, I'm making a right hash of this, but I'm under pressure. I'm on camera. Oops. I'll give up with that idea in a minute. What I'm trying to do is just move that bit of, that's better, move that tag around there. I should trim that in a minute, and we're just going to hold him about there. That's where he was before. Solder him or her over there. Just bend that over a little bit. This tag's a little bit shorter than the one that came off, I think. Sometimes a little bit of fettling is required. We'll just bend that over there. I think that deserves a cup of tea. Right, okay. So same as before, just going to heat the component. Get a little bit of heat going. This is only a very basic soldering iron. I keep meaning to treat myself to a more expensive one, but for this job, just a standard 30 watt, or is it a 30? Yeah, 30 watt soldering iron is absolutely fine. So if you're considering doing this job yourself, don't worry about buying the most expensive Weller soldering iron, even though they're very good. For this kind of work, you don't need it. Him through. Notice I'm getting quite a lot of heat in there, just so that the solder runs and flows onto the component. I know there'll be people out there who can solder better than me, but if it looks right, then it is right. But there we go. So I'll just, you can hopefully see that on camera, that just solder just start to flow down the leg there. There's not really a lot of material to speak of on that leg, so we'll just make sure it's got some good coverage and a bit of mechanical purchase on the tag there. Yeah, it looks okay. I think we're happy with that. So there we are. What we've done there is in real time solder 0.15 microfarad replacement capacitor there, 0.047 microfarad component there, 2 resistors and a triac, and these kits are available readily on eBay. And I always suggest, if you're going to do this job, use a kit that uses the later components, usually these yellow ones. Sometimes I think they're blue, but sometimes these things can be sort of new old stock, these reef ones. They're fine, but again, they might have been sitting around a while. So yeah, that's just trim them off there. I think that's all we need to do. So hopefully you found that useful. Let me know what you think, and I hope that's if you've got a smoking Kenwood Chef A901, A902, in fact really any fully electronic Kenwood tends to work on the same principles, then I hope you find that video useful and have the confidence now to tackle a job like that yourself.